I'm making my first tier list video in a while today for the Surging Sparks standard format. We're going to have a little bit of a break here from tournaments over the holidays, and I thought it was a good time to sit down and talk about what I think the best decks are, what I think the decks that are going to have the best chance to succeed in the near future events are, and give some of my reasoning on some of the archetypes as well and where I place them. I'm not going to have super concrete uh, reasoning for all 20 plus of these decks that I'm going to put on the tier list today, but I want to give you guys at least some insight on this. Haven't made any face cam videos for quite a while. I actually just got some new cables and stuff in for the camera I use for my face cam. So that is fixed, and I probably will be doing these videos a little more frequently now. If you're interested in coaching for Pokemon TCG or my all-inclusive masterclass, you can check out my Metafy link down below. I'm not coaching right now. I'm taking a little bit of a break for the rest of December and the first week or so of January. Give myself some reset time so I don't burn out from coaching. But the masterclass is always available for purchase, and if you ever have any questions about that, just leave it in the comments down below, because the point of that masterclass is really just to give you the most efficient, um, the most cost efficient way to learn pretty much all of the fundamentals that you need to learn. So I put a lot of time, a lot of energy into that masterclass. Definitely don't want anybody to think that I'm just out here looking to make a quick buck. It comes with free updates forever, free support through the private group that you get access to when you purchase the masterclass. So yeah, let me know if there's anything I could do to help you on your competitive Pokemon TCG journey in the comments down below, or you can even add me on Discord or Twitter and send me a message. But let's get into talking about this tier list. So the trainerhill.com tier list creator gives you 5 tiers. So S, A, B, C, and D. And I have this group of decks, or we can even look down here, this group of decks that I'm going to place onto the tier list. So S is going to be the best deck out of this group, and D are going to be the worst decks out of this group. I always like to add that, let's say that I end up putting Hydreigon in D tier. I actually am going to put Hydreigon in D tier. Now, let's say we added some decks that are even worse than Hydreigon. Let's look down the line here. Let's say we added Slaking or United Wings or Hydrapple. Well, if we add some more decks that are even lower on the rung than Hydreigon, then maybe Hydreigon will get moved up to C tier because it's an actual functioning deck. But out of these decks, out of the 20 or so most competitive decks I could find on the tier list creator, Hydreigon will go into D tier. Now let me also explain what each individual tier means. So S tier, this is the deck to beat, or the decks to beat. These are the ones that I expect to see winning the event or getting a whole lot of top 8 placements. A tier, these are the decks that are going to fill out the rest of the top 8, top 16 usually. Very good decks, just not as dominant as the S tier deck if there is one. B tier, typically these decks have an issue, but can comfortably beat either the S tier deck or some A tier decks. Or maybe they're just solid decks that aren't as good as the S and A tier deck, and it's not really matchup dependent. But these B tier decks are decks that I'm expecting to see maybe in top 32, definitely in day 2. But kind of no guarantee on, yeah, these are going to like be top 4, top 8 winning the event. And then C tier, maybe we see these in day 2, but I'm also not going to be surprised if they don't make day 2. And then D tier are decks that I'm kind of expecting to just not make day 2. So that's kind of the best way to depict what this tier list is going to be. And let's start at the top. So I'm going to put Regidrago in S tier. Now, like I said, I haven't been making a lot of videos. I haven't been going to events the past few months, but I've been coaching a lot. And, every person that comes to me and says, "Hey, if you had to suggest one deck for me to learn, what's the best deck right now?" I've been saying Regidrago for months. I've been saying Regidrago since like August. Regidrago V-Star is a fantastic deck. It's very versatile. It has and now it has the Alolan Egg as well as an attacker. That fixed some problems. It makes some situations much less awkward and gives you win conditions into more situations. Um it just has something for just about everything. Its only fault is that it's doing pretty much nothing on turn one. So decks like Miraidon, decks like Roaring Moon, decks like Gouging Fire, decks like Cloth maybe can get that upper hand if they're able to go turbo and take that turn one KO before Regidrago can realistically do much. It has become more normal now for Regidrago to play Cleffa. Um, I Cleffa was the 61st card I was considering at Worlds. I did not play it. I regret not playing it. I played it at Baltimore a couple weeks later and did better. And I definitely did better because of the Cleffa. Also, just learning matchups more and stuff. But Cleffa is super important because against these decks like Miraidon, Moon, Cloth, Raging Bolt, Gouging Fire, these decks that are trying to take that turn one KO, if you can force the Cleffa up, and then Sans Iron Hands, they're only going to take one prize, and then you're not really going to be behind that much. So Regidrago has pretty much something for every deck. There's not a lot of matchups that I'd say are worse than like are significantly worse than like 50-50. I know Raging Bolt's a bad matchup on paper, but I don't even feel like it's that bad of a matchup. It's much closer to 50-50 than I think a lot of people think. Um, the Iron Thorns matchup can be scary, because the Iron Thorns matchup can sometimes just evolve into what cards do you draw into? Do you hit that canceling cologne? Do you hit the motivate, the combination of cards to get motivate going? Are you able to get Hisuian Gudra V-Star into the discard pile, or now Alolan Egg into the discard pile? They're both very good attackers into the Iron Thorns matchup. So yeah, Regidrago, very good deck, very consistent. It does have a fault of not having a strong turn one. But having Cleffa to push up into the active, going second with the grasping draw as well. Then it's a free retreater to pivot back into if they don't KO it. So yeah, Regidrago V-Star is the best deck. If I went to Toronto, I would have 100% played Regidrago. I had registered for Toronto, but was not able to go, unfortunately. Yeah, so Regidrago V-Star, best deck in format. It's not the only deck to play, but it's very, very good. I'd say if you're uncomfortable into the mirror match, if you feel like decks like Cloth and Raging Bolt are like really bad matchups, then I'd say don't play Regidrago V-Star. Pick one of the other decks. But if you are comfortable in the mirror match and you're comfortable into the matchups that the field tells you is bad, then I'd say you're one of the people who should play Regidrago V-Star. Moving on, we're going to put Charizard Pidgeot in A tier. And I'm going to purposely put this in A tier as the first deck. I think it is just right under Regidrago. It's a little less poised into the metagame per se, and more so just a very, very good deck. Similar to Regidrago. Regidrago is a good deck because it's a toolbox. It has different dragon attackers. It has Legacy V-Star, which is broken. Charizard Pidgeot's pretty similar. High HP, high damage output, search your deck for any card every turn. You have Forest Seal Stone to search your deck for another card without the Pidgeot. Um, you have Dusknoir, which goes really well with Charizard and Counter Catcher and playing from behind. So, Charizard Pidgeot, just another deck of very, very strong cards. It has a lot of intrinsic strength, and because of the way it's built with Pidgeot and Forest Seal Stone and Arven, you're able to navigate games typically the way you want to. So it is a deck that's a little harder to play because there's almost always one specific card you need to search with Quick Search, or two specific cards you need to search with Arven. So because you have that ability and power to go and search for any card, it also comes with the responsibility of, well, if you get the card that's not as good, like you get the second best card with quick search, or you miss a combination of cards that you should have gotten with Arvin and you get suboptimal cards, well, the deck loses all of its power level there when you start making misplays. The deck needs to be played very well to perform very well. It has a high skill ceiling, I would say, and a pretty medium skill floor. It definitely isn't low, but maybe it's also not too high. So Charizard Pidgeot, very, very good deck. Definitely shaky against Regidrago in the early turns, especially, but not unwinnable. And Charizard Pidgeot overall, very good deck. The next deck I'm going to put into A tier. Now, this might be different from what I would have done when Surging Sparks first came out. But looking at the meta and how it is right now after Toronto, I'm putting Lugia up here because Lugia is good against the Regidrago decks that aren't playing Sinnoh. Um, and it's just a powerful deck as well. You know, it's right up here with Regidrago and Charizard just being a deck of intrinsically strong cards and combinations of cards. You know, it's never not going to feel broken when you put double Archeops onto the board turn 2 and then swing with whatever attacker you want. You have one-shot potential with Chinchino. You have the double prize cards with Ampy Very Much from Iron Hands. The deck has a lot going for it, and especially with more and more Regidrago decks cutting the Sinnoh, just playing Pokestop. Uh, you know, Sinnoh is a card that's almost strictly just for Lugia, and it's really, really good in that matchup. But Regidrago VSTAR players don't want to play it just for that matchup. So Lugia Archeops, I think, is showing itself as a strong contender again as this metagame grows and shifts. And the last deck I'm going to put into the A tier might be surprising, but it's Miraidon. And, you know, I'm just looking at some of these decks matchups, and Miraidon got so good with Surging Sparks. I think the Miraidon decks the way Miraidon decks are built right now, like Landon Kettler's first place list from Sacramento, the deck can almost like do whatever it wants, like on the early turns. The secret box is just incredibly powerful. Area Zero Under Depths lets you have a board of whatever you want. Latias EX is really good for the deck. Pikachu EX is a really appropriate Terra Pokemon to just have on the board so that you can use Area Zero Under Depths to fill your board with support Pokemon. The deck is just very, very full of support Pokemon that allow you to draw and search and have utilities. The deck is a really, really, really critical mass of power right now, I feel. And it's one of the only decks with a positive Regidrago matchup. It also has a positive Lugia matchup, and its Charizard matchup is probably better than it's ever been, just due to the consistency and support that the deck has, as well as Magneton being a new tool for the deck to get some more energies onto the board seemingly out of nowhere. So Miraidon, not the deck like these others where I'm saying, you know, Regidrago inherently strong, Charizard Pidgeot inherently strong, Lugia Archeops inherently strong. Miraidon is also pretty strong. It's pretty fast. It has all this support Pokemon, but I also think it just looks good into the meta. I was originally going to put it in B tier because it is a solid deck, but I think the meta is coming back around again for Miraidon. So if there was a regional this weekend, maybe Miraidon might come back into action a little bit more than it has been for a few weeks. Next is going to be B tier. So we're going into the decks that I think these decks will make day 2. However, how far they'll go from there, I'm not too sure. So like I said, if a regional was coming up this next weekend, these are kind of the decks that I might think the top of the meta is going to revolve around. And then that can also cause meta shifts as well if, you know, if the player base agrees with this and thinks that this is how it's going to shift and grow. So Raging Bolt B tier. Raging Bolt's a fine deck, but a lot of its success and ranking is because of how popular it has been. And also, like I said, I think more and more experienced Regidrago players are understanding that it's a very, very winnable matchup. Like, it almost feels like a 50-50 to me. And, you know, you could treat any game as a 50-50 in a tournament because it's really a matter of, in this one isolated match against Raging Bolt, do I win or do I lose? And I feel like I have very, very good odds of winning against Raging Bolt while piloting Regidrago, and so I know that other experienced Regidrago pilots feel the same way. That Raging Bolt Ogre Pun is not just you don't just scoop it. It's not just a bad matchup. It's very, very winnable. There's plenty of lines to win it. And I think Raging Bolt Ogre Pawn is so linear and so played out that it's easier for more of the meta to play around it now as well. It's one of the most practiced against decks next to Regidrago. But still a good deck, still a strong deck. Ogerpon is busted. You know, I said when Ogerpon came out that we would see a 3 over 4 of Ogerpon, Teal Mask Ogerpon EX in a deck, and hey, we got 2 of them, Regidrago and Raging Bolt. So next we're gonna put Gardevoir into B tier. Gardevoir is still strong. It's fine against the decks surrounding it, except Miraidon is not a great matchup. I actually think like Gardevoir back in NAIC format, like the double Monkey Dory kind of Gardevoir, I think that might have actually been good into Miraidon. Especially with rare candies like Henry, Brand, and I played at NAIC. And now they are playing rare candies again, but I think the one Monkey Dory is definitely less good against Miraidon than two Monkey Dory, but we're not basing our deck list off of Miraidon at this point in the meta. Regidrago and Miraidon are definitely the worrisome matchups for Gardevoir here, but not unwinnable. I'd say Miraidon's probably actually worse than Regidrago. Because Regidrago, like, to completely clear your board, they need the Kyurem attack without using Legacy Star, because if they use Legacy Star to get into Kyurem, then you can just go, like, Unfair Stamp, Swing with Monkey Dory, Confuse. There's a lot of stuff. They give you a lot of time to come back into the game if they have to Legacy Star to get into the Kyurem. So, Gardevoir also has some hope that, hey, maybe I hit a Regidrago that's not so experienced and this matchup isn't as bad as I might have thought it was. But it's still not the matchup you want to see. Miraidon, likely not the matchup you want to see either as Gardevoir. Although Gardevoir does have some tricks. It has Klefki. Klefki start can just shut down one of these decks potentially. So, strong deck, just definitely more fragile. I'd say, like, if we're calling Charizard Pidgeot like an inherently strong deck of very strong cards, Gardevoir, in my opinion, is definitely just a rank below that right now. Because of its matchups, because it has less inherent strength than Charizard, and because it's more fragile. It has to set up. It's a setup deck. Next, we're going to go ahead and put Pidgeot Control in here. Now, Pidgeot Control is a weird one because it definitely changes and the list changes as the meta grows, as things change, as different decks get popular at tournaments. Pidgeot Control did gain the Black Kyurem and it also gained Counter Gain with Surging Sparks. Both of these cards going to be used specifically against the Regidrago matchup. But yeah, Pidgeot Control is never going to be popular because it's a very convoluted deck to play. But it did get top 8 at Toronto, piloted by Hassan. And you see one or two people pop up and get good placements with Pidgeot Control at most major events, at least in one of the divisions. Hard deck to play, very high skill floor, very high skill ceiling. Never really going to be too popular. Sometimes it will definitely be better than a B tier deck, but right now, the deck is a little fragile with things like Regidrago VSTAR in the top of the meta, and even some faster decks that it typically will have a good matchup against, but it can just get steamrolled out of the game due to speed by things like Miraidon or Roaring Moon or Raging Bolt. However, most of the meta is pretty easy, not pretty easy, but manageable for Pidgeot Control to handle. Regidrago being one of its big problems, just because Regidrago has so much potential to do whatever the heck it wants to do. I have seen Pidgeot Control teching in Toad Scroll now to stop Regidrago's Legacy V-Star power, and if you can actually get that Toad Scroll set up and do all the other things that you're supposed to do, then that actually sounds pretty good against Regidrago V-Star, but it sounds like a lot to ask for, which control decks often do. So I'm not comfortable putting it any higher than B tier right now. Next, I'm going to put Cloth Terrapagos in B tier, and I'm also going to put Terrapagos Dusk Noir in B tier. So both of these decks are trying to end the game in like 3 turns, like literally like turn 1, turn 2, turn 3. Cloth Terapagos does it because Cloth can attack on turn 1 going second. You can also get donks with the promo Pecker on. And then Terapagos Dusknoir, obviously Terapagos itself can attack on turn 1 going second, but on turn 2 or turn 3, you could potentially take 4 prizes on one of those turns instead of 2 because of the Dusclops and Dusknoir. So these decks are these like super, super aggressive prize chasing decks that are just trying to essentially checkmate the opponent by taking prizes faster than most other decks can. Um, Now, Cloth Terapagos was looking like an A tier deck. If you look at my best decks in format video for November, or for December, my bad, the Limitless data at the beginning of the month was ranking this as like the number 3 or number 4 deck based on tournament results. However, this started out as kind of a rogue deck, a deck of single prize or focused stuff, or single prize attacking to try to favorably out trade decks. And I think this kind of deck always benefits in the first couple weeks it's out. We saw Robin Schultz get a top 8 with it. We saw a lot of good players play it for a couple of events. And I think it is a known quantity now. I know it's a known quantity now. And, for example, with Regidrago VSTAR, the Regidrago VSTAR matchup versus Cloth Terapagos is pretty much just use Curum's Trifrost twice. And even if that doesn't work, you have Gudra to stop damage. You have Alolan Executor to try to guarantee a 2 prize knockout on a basic Pokemon. Um, you have Iono plus Stadium to mess with them. Bring up Pheasantipity, hit it with Rolling Iron, go for 4 prizes the following turn. There's a lot you could do, but the double Trifrost is great. Rolling Iron is a fine backup option against Cloth. But yeah, basically when you're looking at a rogue deck like Cloth Terapagos, or a deck that's a little off meta, maybe you're wanting to play it because it does well into the top of the meta. And I don't think it does well enough into Regidrago, and I also don't think Terapagos Dusknoir does well enough into Regidrago. Now, I'd say that's kind of the case for what a lot of the decks are in B tier. Either they don't do well enough against Regidrago, or they do fine against Regidrago, and then not so well against a lot of the other decks surrounding them. So on that note, we're going to bring in Iron Thorns and Dragapult Iron Thorns. I actually think these decks are pretty well positioned just looking at the meta on paper. They are not decks that I would like to play myself. But Iron Thorn shuts down all the stuff in Drago. It shuts down most of the stuff in Charizard. It definitely shuts down Lugia Archeops. Shuts down most of the stuff in Miraidon, with the Iron Thorn's ability, of course. So these decks, I expect these to continue popping up and getting some placements here and there as we can continue through this metagame. I don't think they'll ever get themselves up to an A tier deck or an S tier deck, in my opinion, but they are very good at taking advantage of how much these decks rely on rule box abilities in the current metagame. And that's going to be the end of the B tier. So now we're going to get into some of the lower stuff. I'm going to stop talking so much. We're just going to put some of these decks up here. So Snorlax Stall, Snorlax Stall's still fine, but I think it's falling off because of Regidrago V-Star. We see Charizard Pidgeot decks being able to beat Snorlax Stall now with I've seen more canceling Colognes in Charizard Pidgeot in the last month or two than I've ever seen. Lugia Archeops is not a good matchup for it. Miraidon is actually a good matchup for it because they're just cutting their switch carts now. But I don't think Snorlax Stall is in an amazing position right at this moment. Next is Lost Zone Box, pretty similar. It bad matchup against Regidrago, but then it doesn't even have insane matchups against the other good decks. Could have some favorites floating around, but I don't think it's a deck that um, is necessarily looking advantageous for any reason. So I'm putting it down here in the decks that, it might make day 2, but I'm not expecting anything crazy out of it. Next in this tier of C tier of the decks that I say, maybe make day 2, but I'm not expecting too much out of it right now in this current meta. We're putting Goldango in there, we're putting Cloth in there. Gouging Fire, just another big basic attack deck. I'm putting this and Turbo Roaring Moon in here. Now, these both have a disadvantage, in my opinion, compared to Miraidon or Raging Bolt being the big turbo decks, because Roaring Moon's Frenzied Gouging leaves it with 30 HP remaining, and that means that Regidrago can really easily take advantage of that. Any decks using Dusclops or Dusknoir can easily take advantage of that. And then Gouging Fire, it also has some roadblocks. Magma Basin damage gets pinged on it. Um, the attack costs, retreat costs, the two prizers that you need on the bench to support it. But then it also doesn't have the option that Miraidon has of amp you very much. It also doesn't have the option against Charizard that Raging Bolt has of just attacking with Teal Mask Ogerpon. So I feel like Miraidon and Raging Bolt both have these saving qualities that, although while they're kind of linear, big basic, just swing and take prize card decks, they do have some additional things going for them that I'd say maybe these decks don't quite have in this current metagame. And then we're also going to put the Palkia Dusknoir, Palkia Noctowl decks down here. They're fine decks, but I just don't think their power level is good enough. And also, like I said, I do think Miraidon is really good into this current metagame. So I'd also say that these decks might suffer from that. Of course, you do have the Greninja EX, which can be difficult for Miraidon to deal with, but that's typically played at like a 101 or a 201 count in these decks, so it can't always be relied upon. And then I'll also put Dragapult Pidgeot in here. I think it's just way less, it's way more fragile than like Charizard Pidgeot. You can't get those big explosive attacks back to remove a threat off the board. However, you can get like 4, 5, 6 prize card turns with the deck. But I think it's a little more fragile and a little more convoluted than it's worth to play the deck. And then we're gonna just Dragapult Dusknoir. Actually, I shouldn't have even put it here because sometimes it's the same as Dragapult Pidgeot, but we'll just put it there as well. And then we're just gonna toss Ancient Box and Ceruledge down here. I think Ceruledge is like overly simple and just a very plain deck. It's worst in Golden Go in my opinion. And then Ancient Box. I don't think Ancient Box is good against Regidrago or Charizard or Lugia. Um, Also just a very underwhelming deck for me at this point in the metagame. So there's my tier list right now. Feel free to tell me how wrong I am in the comments down below. Feels good to be making a video like this again, just kind of talking to y'all about the meta and making a tier list. So yeah, these are my thoughts. These are not backed by data, or I guess I collect data, I collect evidence, and then I give my opinion based on those. But you'll see the top decks for January video out either at the very end of this month or the very beginning of January, and those videos are almost always based on data, as long as we have enough data to take into account to make those lists of decks. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time here on Celio's Network.